Oppression is unsustainable. You cannot sustain it. And people will eventually rise up against oppression. How many George Floyds do you need to see before you rise up against oppression? How many Ahmaud Arbery's do you need to see before you rise up against oppression?
No, I'm not worried at all. I rely on God, Allah.
Similarly, when you look at history, what do people say about history? History repeats itself. You constantly see patterns in history repeat themselves, right? So we look, anytime there was injustice in history, anytime there was a high level of oppression in history, people would rise up against it. Oppression is never sustained, is never forever. It's unsustainable. Oppression, injustice, unfairness is unsustainable. It's unsustainable. When you look at what's happening in the United States with massive protests in cities all across America, don't they think about their history? Don't they look at their history? Why did they have a civil war, one of the most bloodiest civil wars in history? It was because of oppression. Why did they have a civil rights movement? It was because of oppression. Why did America start in the first place? Why did people leave their homes, transverse a dangerous ocean, put their lives at risk, left their established society within Europe to start like homes from scratch, to start a society from scratch? There was oppression happening. Their churches, their governments, their kings were oppressing them, and they wanted to leave. How many people left because they wanted freedom of religion? It is unsustainable. Oppression is unsustainable. You cannot sustain it. And people will eventually rise up against oppression. How many George Floyds do you need to see before you rise up against oppression? How many Ahmaud Arbery's do you need to see before you rise up against oppression? How many masajid need to be have these mass murders come in before you rise up against oppression? Oppression is unsustainable. It is not sustainable. And so, have you not traveled through the land and saw the fate of those before who thought they were so arrogant, who thought they were undefeatable, who thought that they were like gods? But when Allah, the one and only true God, gave his punishment, one punishment, they were wiped out. They were wiped out without a trace, Okay. So you look at patterns in history and you see history repeats itself. Okay. And this has happened. I've given an entire halaqah on how there was similarities between World War I and the Fijar Wars that occurred during the time of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So World War I, if you know your history, was a war that brought, basically, it wasn't a war that was planned. It was because of an injustice, of murder, of a few actors that were involved, that you had nations come in through alliances, and there was like this bloody war that lasted for years that brought the world into war, and then it was the pretext for World War II, okay, which again brought nations into it, and was a very, very bloody war that affected the course of human history. Okay, but Fijar Wars was a similar concept. Okay, it was tribalism, a few actors, injustice, trying to rob, certain tribes, other tribes trying to rob other tribesmen, and brought in all these alliances. And it was again a war that lasted 4 or 5 years, and then they decided afterwards, hey, guess what? We need to stop this. We need to come up with some type of justice. We need to come up with some type of pact. And that's why Hulf al-Fadul came, where you have like this agreement that, okay, we can't stand for oppression. We got to stand up for what's just. We can't just stand up for tribalism. It doesn't make any sense. Because of that, our whole society suffered for years and years. We were drawn into something just because of injustice. It's not even worth it. Okay, so history repeats itself. Nature repeats itself. Okay, the science, okay, the study of the world around us, we can see patterns. It repeats itself. Okay, the fate of those who transgress against their Lord, that is something that we can observe, and their fate is repeatable.
Do I feel that the New York police are providing enough protection, or do I have to have protection of my own? I look for protection from Allah.